This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, united in hate, the left's ensuing romance with tyranny and terror. We are joined this evening by Brad Johnson. He is back by popular demand, and he is a former CIA station chief. Brad Johnson, what an honor and a privilege to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Jamie, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Brad. Now, a little bit, I hesitated a little bit about this because I might be acting a little bit like a shameless Don King in some self-promotion, because my book, United in Hate, is a bit central here. And yet you were kind enough in a previous show to comment that it was quite prophetic and also very relevant for our time. So we've decided to continue this discussion and also get into where this deadly romance is headed to right now in our culture. So thank you, Brad. So let's begin with this, Brad. Thank you so much. Tell us, let's begin with how you found United in Hate relevant and prophetic.
Well, it absolutely sets the basis for what we've seen happening over the years since you put that book out, which I believe you published in 2009, if memory serves. So what's happened since then? That was the base. You laid it out beautifully there as to what has evolved into something that's far more troubling and absolutely being ignored by just about everyone. I mean, you have a lot of people talking about, well, gee, maybe this could be a problem, maybe not, and so on. But the basis you laid and kind of where you left off was with our friend Ilich Sanchez Ramirez, better known as Carlos the Jackal. And he was one of the first to put out, kind of lay out the philosophy of why the left is linked up with Islamic extremism. And since then, and also just after your book came out, someone picked up on that book that's a Spanish author and politician. His name is Jorge Verstrange, and I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation of his last name, but he wrote a book. I noted it down because it's a very long name that he has of it, but it's called Peripheral Warfare and Revolutionary Islam: Origins, Rules, and Ethics of Asymmetrical Warfare. And since then, in a lot of the military training and doctrine and discussions and so on, the U.S. military being prepared to face asymmetrical warfare has been recognized as a very serious issue and problem. And that's sort of what we've seen grown out of what you laid the basis for in your book. And this Jorge Verstrange, the Spanish author who put out this book, he's almost completely unknown in the United States, and his book is unknown in the United States. Now in what you see, this link up between the left in Latin America and Iran in particular has just become this unholy alliance, and what they're calling an economic alliance and so on for the most part. But a little known fact, under the Venezuelan government, now the leftist regime that's been active in Venezuela for a long time, that book that he wrote was required reading for the military officer cadre. Required reading. It was issued to every officer in the military and has been shared with other countries like Bolivia and so on. So it's spreading. It's something that's very real for them that's completely unheard of here. And this same Spanish author has also constantly out on the internet putting out documents on how to make WMD, weapons of mass destruction, and so on. And he's pushing for that as part of this philosophy, this link up of radical Islam with the left and asymmetrical warfare.
Right. Brad, thank you so much. So just for our audience, just very quickly, so my book, United in Hate, The Left's Romance with Tyranny and Terror, it dissects and explains this romance between the left and Islam and Islamic supremacism. And also don't miss, and you've got to read David Horowitz's masterpiece on this, Unholy Alliance, which Brad also just referred to that term. So David Horowitz laid down the foundation for understanding also that this romance with Islamic supremacism has very much replaced the romance with communism during the Cold War. The left is always reaching out in solidarity and it's abetting and aiding the enemies of the United States. So Brad, you've brought up some really scary stuff here in terms of how this alliance is now manifesting itself. Explain to us what exactly is asymmetrical warfare, and how is the left now enabling this potential catastrophe through Islamic supremacism?
Okay, well, let's start with the asymmetrical warfare, because that's relatively simple to get into. And this is, by the way, the militaries in Venezuela and Bolivia and Ecuador and the other countries, Nicaragua, that are involved, they recognize that as military-to-military confrontation, country-to-country confrontation, they can't beat the United States. They could all join together, try to fight the United States together, and would still lose. They recognize that. So the asymmetrical warfare, the concept laid out with this phrase, is that you don't fight country-to-country, army-to-army. So you do little things, of which 9/11, which of course we all know is one of the prime examples used in discussion of asymmetrical warfare. And they recognize it was very effective in damaging the economy of the United States, putting fear in the hearts of the American people. And yet it was done with a group of people training to take over an aircraft and that sort of thing. It was not a country-to-country, military-to-military attack. So they're training and practicing and learning and studying strategies that use this asymmetrical warfare. And of course, on our side, our military is doing the same thing, how to defend against it, how to attack it, and so on. Now, the problem is, and this is the basis, part of the basis you laid out in your book, both you and David Horowitz's book, is that now here in the left, that's all protected. You do not hear a lot of criticism of Venezuela, even though, the starvation is rampant, and, things like, there's a joke in Spanish that they're the tritufos, in which pitufos is the word for Smurf in Spanish, like the cartoon, the little blue people cartoon. Tritufos, tufo is also bad smell. So tritufos, they're tritufos in Venezuela because they don't have deodorant, they don't have toothpaste, and they don't have toilet paper. And it's just the economy is been destroyed by all this stuff. But that's not reported here. You ask even here on the left, when there's news, the pundits out on the news programs, on the Sunday shows and so on, they ask about some of the things in Venezuela, and they just, I don't know what to say about that. They've gone a little astray or whatever. So you've got the left running interference, blocking this sort of news from coming out and really being digested by the American people as to how dangerous it's getting down there. I wanted to give, and these are examples. I was kind of going back a little bit, but I wanted to bring one example up, if I can, of some of the things that's been going on, again, since the time your book came out in 2009. There was a case of Jamal Yosef in New York. It was a 2009 indictment, and he's a former Syrian military officer arrested in Honduras trying to sell weapons to the FARC, which is a guerrilla group operating against the Colombian government, with weapons that came from Hezbollah and were being provided by a relative of his living in Mexico. They were being held in Mexico. So you've got Syria, Honduras, Colombian FARC, Hezbollah, weapons in Mexico. All this stuff is just this glob of what now people call transnational organized crime. But it's far larger than that. And that's just one example. You have Iran now that has full-time shipping lines going into Latin America, like to Venezuela. There's what is the economic? They say it's an economic relationship, but what's the drive for economics where you'd have a dedicated shipping line going back and forth between those two countries? There is no economic reason. It's being done for political reasons.
And Brad, I mean, there's a nightmarish scenario at play here, because if the left and the realms that it controls in Latin America, Central America, if you got the Hezbollah and Iran and all these jihadi groups coming in and they're helping them and aiding them and abetting them, there could easily be an infiltration into U.S. territory of dangerous bombs or terrorists coming in to wage some kind of terrifying strike.
Absolutely. And absolutely this is a danger. And this is why it's just so important to bring all this to the surface, is because it's just a hotbed of activity there. There's an area in Latin America called the Tri-Border area. It's where Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina all meet, and that has a very large Arab Muslim population there in the tens of thousands. And that's been a hotbed of activity for many, many decades. There's a lot of publications and so on, studies about the activities going on in that group. Where it has evolved a little bit is to the size and degree, and now you have official participation. Anyone who thinks that the Iranian intelligence is not active in the tri-border area is just absolutely wildly unrealistic. They're very active. And when you have the left here in the United States running interference so that these sort of things are not attacked publicly, it allows them to operate freely. It's the exact same scenario that we saw where under the previous administration, President Obama pulled back his efforts in counterterrorism, and ISIS just boiled to the top. They were allowed to just grow exponentially. That same process is taking place in Latin America. The tri-border area is not the only region that's just lawless. There's also an area where Peru and Colombia and Brazil meet. That area is much the same to a lesser degree. It does not have the Islamic population there, but it has these just lawless, uncontrolled areas. There's just jungle out there. And so people who want to move in and have the wherewithal to put together whatever operation they want to, just move in and do whatever they want. You have that in combination now with these governments of Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, of course, being involved, Nicaragua and Venezuela predominantly, in conjunction with Iran and Hezbollah and these groups. So you have narco traffickers, you have all of the types of slave trade and human trafficking and money laundering. The third largest place for cash activity in the world is the tri-border region. The third largest in the world, billions of dollars in cash transactions. Well, you know, a city of 100,000 out there is huge. And they're the third largest city in the world for cash transactions, billions of dollars a year. I mean, this is a deep, strong indicator of the depth of the problem and how it's growing, and it's utterly ignored by absolutely everyone.
Absolutely, and it's so blatant, even how it manifests itself on American campuses, where now we've got the left and its alliance with these hate Israel groups that want the genocide against Israel and Israelis, all those Palestinian liberation movements on campus, all these Muslim Brotherhood front groups that are operating there, Islamic supremacist groups, and this alliance with the left. It's such a frightening situation on American campuses now. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, what happened when Milo and David Horowitz and Ann Coulter even tried to give speeches at Berkeley? You know, the leftist brown shirts and the Maoist red guards are ruling the campuses now, but it's definitely this leftist alliance with Islamic supremacist groups, and that's just a manifestation of this larger, horrifying problem, as you're pointing out, in Latin America. Before we go, Brad, could you talk just briefly a little bit about, you know, even your experience as a former CIA station chief, and maybe what you're allowed to maybe talk about or to say? What does your experience and what you witnessed with your own eyes kind of bring to this subject? Well,
I'm extremely familiar with all of this, and of course, it's the problem of what I can say and not say, and so I'm not really at liberty to go into tremendous detail on it. Unfortunately, I wish there was so much more I could say, but my fear out of all of this, what bothers me is that it's being ignored, covers being provided for these sorts of activities to take place, and that absolutely is going to bite us in the rear end in the long run. It's coming, and it's being ignored. Now, I understand North Korea is a problem. Russia's certainly been a problem. China's being a problem. ISIS is a problem. There's other problems. But our issue as the United States of America is we have to be everywhere all the time, and we no longer are. Our intelligence was gutted under the previous administration, and it needs to be built back up, and that's just not taking place. There's not recognition of the problem. There's not recognition that a solution needs to take place. And it goes one step further, if I may, just to go on to one other little area of this. Now, existing in Latin America is this thing called ALBA, A-L-B-A, ALBA, and that's the Bolivarian Alliance. And what that is now is it's recognized internationally, and it's supposed to be this economic conference and economic cooperation. But in fact, what it is this: you have Iran has got observer status because they're not in Latin America, they're not a member country, but they have observer status. Why would Iran? What are the natural economic ties between Iran and Latin America? They just don't exist. So it's clearly, being misrepresented as to what it is. But now it's achieved this official level, and what you see ALBA doing is providing political cover internally in Latin America for this linkage between these extremist groups on the left and the extremist groups from Islam. Right,
Brad. Would it be fair to conclude in this way? And I guess I'll say it that that when it came to Obama, he was definitely an enabler and a better of the Unholy Alliance. He was part of the Unholy Alliance, and he facilitated and oversaw the penetration of America by the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that Trump is a providential godsend. Thank God for Trump. I think that he wants to do the best thing and is trying to do the best thing and overturn all the damage Obama did, but he's facing a lot of resistance by what's been left behind in terms of the Muslim Brotherhood forces and all the Obama lovers within government, correct?
Well, certainly Trump is facing overwhelming problems. I mean, he's absolutely detested and hated by all the Democrats and the news agencies and all of the news companies, the Hollywood types. They all hate him passionately. And unfortunately, he's hated by most of the Republican Party, the establishment Republican Party as well. So absolutely, he's faced with a lot of problems. As for Obama,
which says very good things about Trump because of who he's hated by, correct?
Well, yeah. In fact, as you were speaking, talking about David Horowitz and so on not being allowed, Ann Coulter not being allowed to speak on a campus in a California university, I was mentally just thinking that's one of my bucket lists. I want to be hated so much by the left that they won't allow me on campus to speak. So it's one of my bucket items.
Okay, Brad, we have to go. I'm sorry. Please, 30 seconds. Your conclusion on the most important thing to finish this discussion with.
Well, we got to get back in the game. That's it. We got to get back in the game. It has begun. We're starting in some of in these areas, but we have to fight on all fronts all the time. It's just not something where we can pack up and go home and leave the back door open. I mean, we have a southern border to Latin America, and they all know it, and they're going to use it. And I don't want to see Americans killed out of this thing. We have to fight and defend ourselves.
Yeah, scary stuff. Brad Johnson, thank you so much for, kind of returning to the public sphere and to this whole political battle, the culture war, and bringing in your truth-telling and fight for America. Thank you.
Jamie, thank you very much for speaking with me this evening.
Thank you. Hope you'll come back on again soon.
I would be very happy to.
Fantastic. And our audience, please remember we're a fan-generated program. If you support what we do and you like what we do, please go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang, please be subscribed and do a lot of arm twisting of everyone around you that they should be subscribed to our YouTube channel as well. We'll see you soon. Good night.